is a man who has seen agri-business transform from mandis to multinational. With over 4 decades of experience across edible oil, grains, sugar, ethanol, and now bioenergy, we have Atul Chaturvedi, the executive chairman of Renuka Sugars Limited. He's not just a witness to the India's agri-energy transition, but he's been one of its architects. Today, he is here to share with us what it takes to lead transformation at scale. This is Sri Raman, and you're listening to the ChiniMandi podcast. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Sir, you have seen India's agri-trade transform over 4 decades. So, what are some of the defining moments for both sugar and ethanol, let's say in the past decade?
As a matter of fact, I've been around in the agri-business since 1980, which makes it about 4.5 decades.
Yeah.
In fact, over the years, what I've seen is, when I came into this business, India was struggling with lack of availability of goods. And we were still in the socialist era mindset. And you had the controls and storage controls and the Essential Commodity Act in full flow. But in the 90s, India opened up and we became much more globalized. But what I've seen now is India is reverting back to what we saw in the early 80s. So the circle is getting completed. Now we are again back to the era of controls and storage controls and Essential Commodities Act in full flow. As far as the sugar sector is concerned, I came into this perchance only in about 2018. And that was the time when this Renuka Sugars was actually taken over by Wilmar.
Yeah.
And that is the time I've been in the sugar business, which is about maybe 7-8 years.
Yeah.
And that's about it. Even in this period, what I've seen is sugar industry has undergone a lot of transformation. When I came into this industry, we were struggling with massive stocks of sugar. Almost India was carrying something like about 14 to 15 million tons of sugar in the closing stocks. But then I think better sense prevailed and the right kind of thrust was given to ethanol, and we were able to liquidate these stocks first by way of giving subsidies and export incentives and all, and now that all the surpluses which used to get generated now are getting diverted to ethanol, which is definitely something which has actually changed the rules of the game as far as sugar sector is concerned, and that has come as a big boon not only to the sugar sector, but to the farmers as well as for the environment as well. So
Right.
I think we're on the right track.
I have a lot of follow-up questions on the nuances of that. But before that, a little more question on your journey. So how was transition for you from edible oils and other agro-commodities to sugar, ethanol, bioenergy now? You're among the top providers of ethanol to the off-takers. So how was your journey in this?
Now, my journey in the edible oil and the agri scenario has been pretty interesting. When I came into this business, and it started off with soybean. And soybean, those days, India was producing something like about 150 to 200,000 tons of soybean in total. And the size of the plants, or rather the solvent extraction plants, used to be about 60 tons per day. If you tell somebody it was 60 tons per day, he would say, was it a laboratory size plant? Which is the fact. But then we saw the transformation happening as far as the solvent extraction industry is concerned. And India started having something like 400 to 500 ton TPD plants. And the crop also ballooned. Now, from a level of 150 to 200,000 tons in the early 80s, now we are producing something like about 12 to 13 million tons of soybeans. So that has been one of the great changes which has happened over time. I think sometime in mid-90s, I happened to join Adani's, and that gave me a much bigger canvas to work on. So in Adani's, in the last 20, 25, 30 years, I was responsible for 3 companies. One was the agri-logistics, the other was this apple business, which is under Adani Agri-Fresh,
Yeah.
and the flagship company was obviously Adani Wilmar. So you could say I was kind of a midwife for Adani Wilmar.
Yeah.
And Adani Wilmar actually changed the rules of the game in the country. India was opening up big time in late 90s, and we put up the first big refinery at Mundra. At that time, people were saying that they are fools, because the maximum size of a refinery in the 90s in India was about 100 tons.
Right.
We saw, or rather Wilmar saw, the changing scenario, India opening up, India moving the China way. So we put up the first 600-ton plant. As a matter of fact, at that point of time, Wilmar was insisting on putting up a 1,000-ton plant. My own experience told me that it may not be worthwhile, but obviously I did not have the vision of the Wilmar chairman. So we finally homed in on a 600-ton plant. And mind you, by the time we finished completing that plant,
It was not sufficient.
no, we were putting up another 1,000-ton plant.
Wow, okay.
And the capacity of the Mundra plant is now something like 6,000 tons per day.
That's 10x, yeah.
So you can imagine how much India has changed.
True, true.
In the late 90s, India was importing just about 300,000 tons of oil. Now, our import is closer to about 16 million tons, or 160 lakh tons. So there's a big change. The consumption levels have also undergone massive changes. The per capita consumption of edible oil in the 90s and all was 7 to 8 kilos. Now an average Indian is consuming something like closer to about 18 kilos per capita. So we've seen all these changes happening, and I've had the good fortune of handling other commodities as well, like wheat, rice, corn for that matter, because Adanis were also into big time into exports and all. So I've seen the cyclical nature of sugar industries as well in Adani. I still remember one year we were importing sugar into the country, and next year we were actually exporting sugar. So that has been the scenario. India, from an exporter of corn or maize, is now becoming an importer.
Yeah.
So that is also one big change that we are seeing. India was a very big exporter of soybean meal, but we hardly export any soybean meal. Now maybe about 1 million tons, that's about it. Mustard crop has also ballooned. So Indian domestic production of oilseed has also grown, but it has not grown in the same proportion as our consumption has grown. So these are some of the changes which have happened, and as India is opening up to the world in the last couple of decades, so is the consumer preferences as well.
So what was one pleasant surprise or any kind of surprise when you moved from edible oils to sugar at a leadership level? Like something that took you by surprise?
I won't say, in fact, I go to the extent of saying that managing a sugar industry is much more simpler.
Okay.
We are, for all practical purposes, the sons-in-laws of the government. I don't think there's any industry in the world where the raw material price is fixed.
Yeah.
How much you can produce is fixed. How much you can sell in a month is fixed.
Yes.
At what price below which you cannot sell, that is fixed.
Yes.
Whatever ethanol you are producing, that is fixed. How much you can sell ethanol.
So you're coloring within the lines throughout. So
it's only value addition. In fact, one of the challenges which I faced when I came here, as to where the hell am I going to add value to this business? And that is the time I said, okay, obviously ethanol was picking up. The other thing which I thought would give us and separate us from the rest was the thrust on consumer packs. which is Madhur. Madhur is our brand.
Yes.
And that is what we've been pushing big time. When we took over this company in 2018 and I got pitchforked into the hot seat, the Madhur volume was about 60,000 tons on an annualized basis. Now we are something like about 200,000 tons. And we've also seen how the consumer is changing.
Yeah.
In fact, I see similarities with edible oil as well. In the 90s, India was eating a lot of loose oils. In fact, the ratio between packed oil and loose oil was something like 80-20 or maybe 85-15 in favor of loose.
Right.
Now the scenario has changed.
So we have seen similar with packaged data as well, right? Barely 1% was packaged data.
In
the
fact,
country that eats so much wheat.
Let me recount a small little incident. In fact, I had a big argument with Shiv Kumar, the CEO of ITC, and we were there. He's a good friend of mine. We were in a marriage, and I was telling him, your Ashirwad is not going to do well, because in Gujarat, every lady has a small little milling machine, a chakki in her house, or you utilize the next door because everyone wants fresh atta. So he said, no, Atul, it will kick off. And he was right. And I was
with
wrong.
more urbanization, people moving to the
now
town.
You see Ashirwad selling almost something like maybe 1.5 to 2 million tons or thereabouts. It's a massive volume. And that is the reason why I was actually initially resisting introducing atta in Adani Wilmar.
Okay.
But now we've done that, and the volumes are really picked up. So I think India is changing, and we can see the consumer also becoming much more conscious in terms of hygiene, in terms of packaging, in terms of, and the new generation is this quick commerce and
that's it.
That has also encouraging this change, because they won't like to transfer loose goods.
If you're making omelette today, you can keep the tawa, then order it. By the time the tawa is hot, you got your ingredients.
Yes. In fact, I saw one ad which said that by the time you get the sugar from the next door neighbor, we'll be able to deliver it to you. So those are changes which are happening, and they are a reflection of how India is changing.
Sir, coming to sugar a little more. So it is a cyclical business. But do you see ethanol as a nice shock absorber to, adjust the fluctuation of demand, the output, income levels of farmers, all the stakeholders involved?
My take is, had it not been for ethanol, the sugar industry would have actually struggled, and struggled big time in ensuring that the farmers get paid in time. Because the trouble with our industry is, or rather the bane of our industry is, you crush in 4-5 months and then sell the sugar for the balance period.
Right.
So what ethanol gave, the change which ethanol brought, was that when you're crushing during the crushing season, you're able to convert the juice into ethanol and get rid of the excess sugar which you would normally be producing during season. And when you are selling it in the season, the realization is much faster. Obviously, when the realization of the mill is faster, the farmer gets paid much faster. So now you don't hear all those stories of mounting farmer dues and all.
So it is a boon. It is
absolutely. It's a boon. And I hope this boon continues, because there are too many flip-flops as far as policies are concerned.
Yes, there were on and off, using sugar as a feedstock. There was on and off on that. So beyond ethanol, sir, do you think there should be any other systemic changes for the sugar industry as such? It's been there for like thousands of years now.
One big change I think the sugar industry should actually welcome, or rather push for, is converting loose sugar into packed sugar. In fact, if you look at our consumption pattern, if India is consuming something like 28 million tons,
28 million metric ton,
or thereabouts, about 9 to 10 or maybe 10 to 11 million tons is what is going into direct household. The balance is all industrial or institutional or whatever. So as far as this part is concerned, this direct to home, that needs to be converted into packed. And that is something which we've been trying to convince the consumers as well as industry that makes more sense to sell in a packed form. Consumer fee is fine because loose sugar will also absorb moisture and obviously gets contaminated as well.
Right.
So it's not healthy. So I think that is one change which the industry needs to push for, and we as a Renuka are definitely pushing for that.
Right. So from a Renuka's perspective, how are you future ready for balancing between sugar, ethanol, in terms of technology, sustainability, balancing all the stakeholders?
I don't think there's a problem as far as technology is concerned, because we have technical staff who has worked in Brazil as well, because Renuka used to have Brazilian operations as well.
Yeah.
So our guys are quite experts in that. In fact, we were probably one of the first ones to use cane juice and convert that into ethanol.
Right, far back in 2012.
Yeah. So not many were doing it at that point of time. So I think we have the requisite. But the only thing which we thought is important from our perspective is most of our units are concentrated in West and Southern India. So we've been trying to geographically de-risk our business, and that is the reason why we bought over one unit in UP.
Yeah.
We definitely will keep looking at investment opportunities to de-risk our business.
Right, the Anamika in UP.
Yeah.
Right? And also the refineries in both Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea.
That's right. That's right. There is a bit of a challenge in Haldia, because we've got a refinery both in the East Coast and the West Coast. Kandla refinery runs almost 125% capacity utilization. Haldia is a bit of a challenge because logistics is a bit of a challenge. So Haldia, if I'm not wrong, was put up by the erstwhile management essentially to feed the eastern sector, which is devoid of sugar, which doesn't have sugar. But that's an import-based unit.
Of course, you import raw sugar, refine it, and...
No, even from the consumption angle, you can import raw, convert into refined, and they sell it in the domestic market.
Yeah.
Re-exporting it is a bit of a challenge because logistics is a little bit of a challenge.
We don't export towards the east, is what you're saying, because it has to go to the west. The plant is in the east. So.
Exactly. One is that, and secondly, Bangladesh, which used to be a natural market for Haldia, has also got quite a few refineries which have come up.
Right.
So Haldia, Bangladesh as an importer has also reduced. So those are some of the challenges.
How about sustainability, sir? How are we balancing the increased need for using food or food crops for energy production now? So the impact of water, how many thousands of liters it takes to make a liter of ethanol and so on. From a Renuka's perspective, how are you balancing it?
At a macro level, to answer your question as far as the food versus fuel debate is concerned, my take is the country which has surplus in a commodity, only they should be diverting food to fuel.
Okay. Yeah.
For example, if you look at Indonesia, Indonesia is having surplus in palm. So they're diverting palm to biodiesel, which is fair enough. Brazil is surplus in both sugar and edible oil as well, or soya for that matter. They're diverting it to biodiesel and to ethanol. That's fair enough. India is surplus in sugar.
Right.
For us, diverting sugar to ethanol, the surplus quantity, is fair enough. But to divert grain, and more so maize, is a bit of a question mark.
Because we went from exporter to importer now, right?
That's right.
That's impacting the poultry industry, that's impacting the starch industry.
The other day I was talking to one senior bureaucrat in Delhi. What he was saying was, when we were pushing maize in the country, the idea was that maize would replace rice or paddy. Because paddy is a water guzzler, big time water guzzler. And India is heavily surplus in paddy. So they wanted to reduce the production of paddy in the country. But unfortunately, what is happening is, maize is replacing a commodity in which India is deficient. India imports almost something like 60-65% of its edible oil needs.
Yeah.
If India consumes 25-26 million tons, out of that 16 million tons is actually imported. So what is maize doing is, maize is taking land away from soya, taking land away from cotton as well. And paddy cultivation is not coming down, it's going up.
All through, right? Maize is kind of a tricky spot here because we have gone from export to import. And poultry associations, they are the ones who are feeling the heat.
No, it's not only the Poultry Association which is feeling the heat. In fact, I have a background of being an edible oil man, now pitchfork into a sugar industry. The whole edible oil sector is in very serious trouble. Because what has happened is, one of the byproducts of maize is DDGS. DDGS prices are very low in the country. So soybean meal, which used to be selling at something like 40 rupees a kilo, now is down to about 27-28 rupees a kilo. With the result that the parities or the profitability of the soya industry has been wiped out. Same is the case with mustard as well. So the DDGS is not only killing the poultry industry, but is also troubling oilseed sector. And oilseed is where India is terribly deficient. In terms of poultry, what has happened is maize or corn, which used to be available in the country at 12 or 14 rupees a kilo, now is available at 24 to 25 or 26 rupees a kilo.
True.
And yesterday again, the MSP has been jacked up.
Yes.
From 22 now to about something like 24. So we will have to face the music.
Right. So again, I'll circle back on this and we'll move on. So from sustainability, especially water issues, from a company, as a company, how are you seeing any new initiatives or steps to balance all of it?
No, what we have seen is, it's important to educate the farmers, and so we have a very strong cane department in all our plants. So we do a lot of extension work. In fact, we had tied up with an NGO called Solidaridad also to educate the farmer near our plants and to give them the right kind of good practices, GMPs. And also we are encouraging them to utilize this drip irrigation. Even for harvesting, we are encouraging big time these harvesters and mechanized harvesting. So all those things we are doing. Plus the farmers, when Wilmar took over this company, at that point of time, the payment position for the farmers wasn't all that great. And that was probably one of the reasons why the company changed hands, because the company was not in the pink of health.
Right.
And that we ensured that the farmers are getting paid in time, and very much in time. And so I think the farmers, as far as Renuka is concerned, are reasonably happy.
Yes. Sir, talking of Madhur and packaged sugars, you would have noticed there is a rising sentiment of no sugar challenge, anti-sugar. People I can point you 4 or 5 people in my phone book right now who have completely given up sugar in any form. Do you see that affecting retail consumption or the growth of sugar as such at a retail level?
I was reading an article by one famous nutritionist, and she said, sugar doesn't increase diabetes. What affects diabetes is your lifestyle.
Of course.
In fact, sugar is not a cause for diabetes.
It never is. It never was. Yeah.
So my take is, I think this all this talk which we are hearing, it definitely is having an effect for sure. Because in terms of the consumption, in the good old days, India was penciling in 500,000 tons of increase in consumption every year.
Now we went like what, 21 million metric ton to almost 30 now. We are closing 30 million in just 3 years. Yeah.
But that is coming off somewhat. But if direct home consumption is coming down, the institutional consumption is actually going up.
Right.
Because what is happening is, as we are getting more and more exposed to the Western world,
Yeah, you are not doing laddu at home, but you are buying laddu, so it's the same amount.
you're buying chocolates, you're buying a whole lot of other things
Yeah.
which use
Summer
sugar.
and ice creams and beverages and so on.
But one thing is for sure, that the pace of the increase in consumption is going to be much more relatively modest.
Modest, okay.
And that gives an opportunity to ethanol
Again,
as
focus
well.
on ethanol. Yeah.
So, and that's, I hope the decision makers understand this. And now our Prime Minister is also saying that you should consume less of edible oil and less of sugar. And incidentally, accidentally, I handle both. So, but then there's an opportunity in all this.
Yeah. So little bit focus on ethanol now. We have achieved our targets much ahead of time for the 20% blend. So now there is a talk about 30, maybe it happens, maybe 30 by 30, 2030, so on and so forth. How prepared are we as a country, and what are the gaps or challenges that you see?
In fact, as far as achieving 30% blend is concerned, my take is that even Brazil, which has been having a much earlier start than us, they are only at around 27.
27, they are at 27.
Or thereabouts. So I think achieving 30 should not be too much of an issue, because we have the ecosystem in place, more so as far as sugar is concerned. Sugar has an ecosystem. As far as the grain ethanol is concerned, there the ecosystem has to keep coming up, and you'll have to ramp up the capacities, but whether you will have the feedstock or not, that's a bit of a question mark. Sugar, I'm sure, will be able to supply something like 7 to 8 million tons of diversion.
Yeah.
So that's a definite possibility. And maybe if this year's crop is good, next year you could see diversion of close to about 5 million tons of sugar towards ethanol. So achieving that should not be a problem. One big issue as far as ethanol marketing is concerned is, what is happening is, with the grain ethanol and sugar ethanol also competing simultaneously for the same space, the oil marketing companies delay the offtake from one or the other, depending on what their priorities is. My take is that the sugar industry works essentially for 4-5 months in a year, when they can produce at the maximum from the cane juice, because once the off season comes in, molasses and B
C and
so it will take its own sweet time.
Right.
That is the time, if you're not in a position to take the supplies, the sensible thing would be, and they are not able to take the supplies because they don't have the storage as well.
Right.
So the industries have the storage. Industries can also ramp up the storage. We can store it, but we don't have the money or the wherewithal. Arranging money also may not be a big issue, but the interest on that money.
How do you recover the capex on that?
So the sensible thing, in my view, would be, just like the government used to have this buffer system
silos
in place.
And buffers for food.
Yeah, buffer for sugar.
Yes.
So you could keep the sugar in the factory, and ultimately the government pays you the interest differential. So interest is taken care of by the government, or in this case it can be by oil marketing companies, and that will ensure that the health of the industry remains intact. Otherwise, at some stage, the difference between holding sugar or holding ethanol would diminish.
Correct.
And this year we've seen that.
Yes. Yes. So I was just coming to the next one on that. So how do you see the entire logistics and the infrastructure around the transport, storage of ethanol? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of work to be done there.
Storage at the factories is adequate.
Yeah.
And if it has to be ramped up, it can be ramped up. As far as the oil marketing companies are concerned, they have also, in the last few years, ramped up the storage. And in this, we must give due credit to our Transport Minister, Mr. Gadkari. He's been pushing ethanol big time.
Yes.
And I don't think creating the storage space will be too much of an issue going forward, if only they can utilize the storage available at the plants and take care of the interest burden of the plants.
Right.
So it doesn't affect the farmers as well.
So talking of second generation ethanol, there's a lot of talk, but only few have implemented it. What do you think about the rise of 2G? Of course, it is better. It reduces dependency on food crops essentially, right? It can use the other residual material and so on. So where are we on that? How do you see?
I was talking to one senior guy from Wilmar,
Mhm.
and Wilmar is big time into palm crushing
Yeah,
and the palm residue. So there was a lot of talk that palm residue you could convert that into
PKC, the PKC
normal when you crush the
palm
palm,
kernel cake, the ones
not
used.
the cake, but
Okay.
the palm kernel when you crush.
Right.
No, not the kernel. Kernel is the inside one. The palm fruit when you crush, you have a lot of something like the bagasse.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it is also a very fibrous material. So that there was talk that this can be converted into cellulosic ethanol and 2G ethanol and blah, blah, blah. They said we did a lot of research. The cost is prohibitive. So people say that the cost will come down because when solar was introduced in the country, the unit was selling at something like 16 rupees solar electricity per unit. Now it is down to about 2.5.
Yeah.
So we don't know, but to me, it is something too much in the future.
Okay.
And honestly, we would not like to put our money in that because the biggest challenge will be consolidating the feedstock, and the cost currently are prohibitive to convert into.
So when you say
ethanol.
cost, it's operating or capex?
Both.
Uh-huh.
Both.
But won't it diversify your feedstock inputs that you can take? There are multiple. You don't have to depend on any single crop.
So
Anything
if I have to diversify my feedstock, I would much rather convert part of our capacities to diversify into grain as well. So grain is, or maize is what the government is pushing for.
Right.
So as far as 2G ethanol is concerned, it can be honestly pushed by government agencies which can bear the burden of
Both the heavy capex and
yeah,
the OpEx.
exactly. So that's why whatever you are seeing is only been done by the government.
Yeah, IOCL, Panipat, and so on.
And then there's a Numaligarh refinery based on bamboo.
Yeah, bamboo.
So my take is it's going to take a lot
Let
more
the
time.
state take the big swing first, and then maybe we'll.
Maybe show the way.
Yeah.
Show the way.
Sir, we spoke about the food fuel, but on that, we need energy security. For example, if we take so much importance about our defense security. You look at how much efforts we have put on our AI, and we need local GPUs and infrastructure and so on. When it comes to energy security, we are always importing and so on and so forth. At the same time, you start diverting one single crop like a maize, one single crop, and you already told me the second order effects of all of it. So how do you think we can balance this as a country? I mean, we are talking as two Indians now.
Yeah, I am an Indian. All in all,
No, I'm just saying,
sure.
not as an industry expert. It's about a collective, bigger.
No, honestly, I'm no expert. As far as the food versus fuel debate is concerned, my take is the country which is surplus in a commodity should end up diverting food for fuel. But if you need to import and then
divert it,
it doesn't make sense. So then might as well import. Like for example, today, corn into this thing, might as well import the ethanol itself. Ethanol.
The by end product itself.
Yeah.
Why take
So
two steps?
India is not deficient in forex.
Right.
So good old days when we were living from hand to mouth in the 80s.
Yeah.
So today our foreign exchange situation is pretty strong. We are close to about $700 billion worth of foreign exchange with RBI. Imported fuel is going to keep coming in by way of crude and all.
Yeah.
And if we are able to divert about or achieve a 30% target, so that much of petrol would be less. So I think the roadmap as far as diverting sugar and maybe X surplus, whatever is available, is the way forward.
Right. So in general, even if you consider all the spectrum of bioenergy, whether it is CBG or now we are even trying to do bitumen, biobitumen and green hydrogen. You think in about 5 to 7 years we'll be in a position to net export anything at all?
No way. No way.
Yeah.
We are a big energy guzzler nation, and the way things are improving in the country, the way the paying capacity of everyone is increasing. Good old days, I still remember, I come from a bureaucratic family. So when we got the first scooter, that was a big achievement in the family.
Yeah. Was it a Chetak or a Vespa or Priya or?
It was a Chetak.
Chetak, yeah.
Way back. And that too we got from a foreign exchange. Those days, in the early, you were probably not even born.
Yes, probably
in
not.
the 80s, you could get a Chetak only through foreign exchange. So you used to get foreign exchange from some of your relations. I still remember my first Chetak I bought for $740.
Oh, you bought it in dollar, okay.
Yeah, obviously, because Chetak was available only in dollars in the good old days. From that time to now, everyone in the family has a car.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So one family of 4 has 2 or 3 cars.
Right.
So obviously we are becoming big guzzlers.
So even if we produce as much energy, we are going to be using it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So energy, that is the reason why you see hydrogen being pushed, solar being pushed big time, wind being pushed big time, and bioenergy via the waste as well is being pushed.
Even the municipal waste has been pushed.
Yes. So all these things, I don't think India will be a exporter for sure. That's not on the cards.
Right. Sir, a little bit of history from Renuka. There was a time when Unstoil founders perhaps had farmers as a shareholders in the company itself. That's since changed. It's a corporate now. But how else do you see do you ensure farmers kind of pledge their allegiance towards you, or as opposed to someone, or you keep the warmth going with them? So how are you balancing that?
No, it's not a question of balancing. In fact, when the erstwhile management made farmers at one of the units, the unit was Monoli, if I remember correctly, it was definitely a very novel idea. And that was the time when Renuka was probably going public. And the farmers also got the upside. And obviously they became pretty rich. But then obviously the company got into some kind of a trouble and
over leverage, Brazil happened, so many things happened.
Yes. So many things happened. So farmers also lost money. But what I've seen is that the farmers stuck with the company.
Yeah, the company, okay.
So when we took over, obviously funding was the least of the issues, because Wilmar is a pretty big conglomerate in the $60-70 billion group. So we ensured that the farmers are paid in time. And then we also ensured that the farmers should get a feel of the sugar which is being produced from the cane they are supplying. So we subsidized sugar for the farmers as well.
Oh, even if it's a packaged one? Or,
yes. Okay. We give them that.
Okay.
So, and that has ensured.
Is it the Utsav program that also covers it, or that's completely the Madhur Utsav?
No, Madhur Utsav is for different things. Okay. That is for in the urban areas, in the areas which are underfed. This is for our farmers.
Okay.
Because we are getting the cane from them, and they should also have a feel of what that cane is getting converted into.
Right.
So I think overall, the farming community or the farmers who are attached to our plants are pretty happy. So I don't see any reason, and we do a lot of extension work. In fact, our cane department is one of the strongest within the company. Right. So I have not seen, being an edible oil man, I have not seen such extension or some extensive work being done with the farmers as far as the oilseed is concerned. If the oilseed sector were to emulate the sugar, I think India's problem in terms of edible oil deficiency would probably ease.
That's well said. So, out of curiosity, so for sugar we have what 6 million farmers. What would that be in the food, oil seeds?
Oilseed also India, I couldn't be able to pinpoint that, but India is producing something like what 35, 38 million tons of oilseeds. So it's a lot of oilseeds which India is producing. Cotton,
Yeah.
Mustard, soya, groundnut, even palm, coconut. So it's a varied scenario, and I'm sure hell of a lot of and oilseed sector has suffered largely on account of the apathy, and we have not given them the due support, and which is why you end up importing something like about
Right. So you're saying
60%.
if every other agro commodity treats the farmers the way sugar industry treats, there's a lot of problems to be solved.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, the sugar farmer is very blessed.
Okay.
The sugar farmer, because what price he sells his cane is fixed.
Yeah.
So he gets a solid return. And if he produces good quality cane and there's higher recovery, obviously he gets much more better.
I agree to that, sir. But I've spoken to some farmers who I know of small acres, like 7 acres, 8 acres. So they are facing increased issues like labor shortage. They can't do a mechanization because the land is in between 3-4 other people's land, so they can't get the machines there. They don't agree to all harvest at the same time. And then there's the influence of whose produce will be bought first at the mill through some, the mill owners have certain vested interest or skin in the game, or some of the owners of the mills, right? So they do face this, but I agree they are blessed as compared to maybe a cotton.
No, in fact, they should compare themselves with an oilseed farmer. The oilseed farmer, by that extension, is much more in trouble. But as far as the cane farmer is concerned, in fact, one of the solutions could be, and that would be relevant for practically all the agri-commodities in this country, but it can be done on a pilot scale as far as sugar is concerned. So what you can have is a village or a cluster. Consolidate the land, have something like a cooperative, a loose cooperative, not the politician coming into play, but a loose kind of cooperative or an FPO or something, and do mechanized farming. So everyone in that area who is pooled in his resources,
the scale works for them,
the scale will work for them. You could probably, from a level of about 65, 70 tons per hectare, you could probably reach 100 tons.
Yeah, the yield will improve, everything will improve,
And you can do mechanization, so your labor requirement comes down. Now,
there is collective strength.
So I think it's important that that kind of a solution is pushed for.
Excellent, sir. Talking a little bit about your leadership. So, Wilmar is an international entity. So how do you balance, let's say, your international entity versus Indian culture, Indian influences of culture or innovation, their priority versus the way things work here? How do you do this as a leader?
Yeah, I've been doing this for the past almost 25 years.
Yeah.
Because Wilmar came as Adani Wilmar way back in 98, 99.
Right.
So I think there's absolutely no issue, because Singapore culture is a mixed culture. And in fact, they have been influenced big time by India as well, because Indian population in Singapore is also sizable.
Yes, Tamil is one of their languages.
Yes. And in fact, the president itself was a Tamilian. So culturally, I don't see any difference. But obviously, with Wilmar coming in, we definitely have a much bigger view of the world and what's happening around. And in fact, the biggest advantage with Wilmar on the scene is the information flow. So we get the information from various parts of the world, and they also get the information because Wilmar has assets in other parts of the world as well.
Yes.
The sugar assets and edible oil assets as well. So I think that has not been too much of a challenge. And I have been personally blessed by working with two visionaries. One was Gautam Adani,
Yeah.
and the other is Mr. Kwok
Cook
Kunong,
from the chairman
the
of
chairman of Wilmar.
Wilmar. Yeah.
And it has never been a problem handling both or them handling us.
Right.
I
I'm fishing for any management lesson here that I could take back as a growing manager myself.
I can tell you one small anecdote. I was seeing, there used to be a program called Rendezvous. In fact, Simi Grewal at that point of time in that interview was interviewing J.R.D. Tata, a great luminary. And Simi asked J.R.D., so you've got such a big empire, you've got 5 lakh people working for you. How do you manage to run such diversified empire? His answer was fantastic. What he said, Simi, what's so great about it? I manage 5 people.
Yeah. And they manage.
The 5 people manage 50. That 50 manage 500. And that 500 manage 5,000. And 5,000 manage 5 lakh. So, for me, that was a very big lesson. Now, if you ask me how do I manage diverse businesses or diverse commodities, the answer is very simple. I don't need to be a master in everything because I cannot be. Then you've got masters.
Right.
You give them the space, give them responsibility and accountability.
Yeah, just coming to that, because you have a KBK, you have ethanol, you have sugar, you come from the trenches of oil and edible and other agro. So there is one more management lesson here somewhere, right? All these are different technical skills and capabilities. So how do you manage them?
No, there are people who manage it.
Right.
For me, more important and the most important thing is managing the guys who are managing those businesses. So handling personnel is very, very critical for handling big businesses because you can't do justice to all the businesses which you are handling. So you need people and they need to get the right kind of trust, the right kind of authority, the right kind of review mechanism, because review mechanism also has to be in place. And authority and responsibility go together.
Yeah.
They go together. So generally what I've seen over the years is people say, okay, I am a big delegator. They delegate, but then end up, okay, before you do that, check back with me. So the moment you do that, so delegation is over and done with.
You're centralizing again, you're no longer delegating.
Then it is your decision.
Yeah.
You've not delegated. And by delegation, in the true sense, as I've told, you build up leaders. I can proudly say many people who have worked with me are handling big businesses and big companies in the country.
Excellent, yeah. You have raised more leaders yourself, yeah.
And it has made my life that much more simpler.
Right.
So,
okay, so in the sector, if you have noticed, in India there is a huge rise of startups as such, but we barely notice anything in the bioenergy or agro-tech as such. In agro, most of them are in the logistics of agro. There are really big companies out there. They move it from farm to fork and so on. But core research based, I'm talking, right? Or even in the bioenergy, there are some companies outside India that produce aviation fuel from air, from carbon dioxide in the air, right? So why do we think we have lack of such entrepreneurial zest in this sector, agro, bio, core?
Which means agri.
Yeah.
Agri is a sector has not encouraged people to come in. And that is largely because, and that is why you see the investment in the agri from the corporate sector is practically zilch.
Yes,
The only investment may be in some infrastructure like warehouses or silos and things like that. So these things require money. And getting into the agri space or the processing part of agri, that is easier. But running it successfully requires a lot of money, because entry is easy, running is much more, because even in putting up a sugar mill is no big deal. But ensuring
the supply,
the working capital
yeah.
and the management, etc., bandwidth, so that requires. And I don't see too much of, because most of the startups are largely in managing supply chains, like all these startups.
Yeah, there's a lot of supply chain
So it's only largely
yes.
linked to computers, and you
Correct.
create an app, and
yeah.
so no real business is getting created.
So a small debate on the capital part. Look, even if you are generating one more Candy Crush today or one more video game, you will get $2 million check, and
in fact,
so the money is not a challenge. So
money is not a challenge. That is the trouble. In fact, I was talking to an erstwhile IIM director, Ahmedabad IIM director, who was a colleague in Adani. I said, you've been at the helm in IIM Ahmedabad for such a long time. Why is it that all your students are not getting into real economy? They're all going into the make-believe economy or the financial world. But that's where the money is. So youngster will only go in for the business or
so
sector.
If you were to give a message to young aspiring entrepreneurs who have not yet made up their mind, whether they are building on more consumer SaaS or want to get into agri, what would that be?
My only advice would be, if you want to get into the agri space, do extensive study before jumping into the fire.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're better off handling things via the computers.
Sir, few rapid fire questions. You can say it in one word or as many, fewer the words, the better, right? So, one contrarian belief you hold about India's energy future.
Contrarian view is India should stop diverting grain to ethanol if the surpluses get wiped out. Today, there are surpluses available. Once the surpluses are down, we should stop diverting.
One country India can take inspiration for bioenergy.
I would call two countries, Indonesia and Brazil. Indonesia for palm biodiesel and Brazil for ethanol.
A policy decision you wish had come 10 years earlier.
The policy which I thought when Modi ji came the first time as Prime Minister in 2014 was that land reforms in the country would happen. Because just imagine, the land is getting fragmented as the generations pass. Now, average land holding in the country may not be more than 1.5 acres. So 1.5 acres is just like a kitchen garden. So it's important that India seriously looks at land reforms. It's a ticklish subject. It's a subject which is quite emotive. But then it's important that we should stop treating land as holy cow and treat it as a commodity, as an economic this thing.
Yeah, a capital good at that.
Yes, yeah.
Any startup in the agro space that caught your attention?
I would say the only startup which has caught my attention is the ChiniMandi. Because when we came into the sector, I was always in lack of information about this. So for me, at a personal level, ChiniMandi has been a great teacher because you get information practically online. Edible oil, I know quite
Yes,
well
3
because I've
decades
been
of it.
tracking for donkey's years. But as far as edible oil, this sugar is concerned, I would say ChiniMandi has been doing a yeoman service, and I'm serious about that.
Thank you, sir. That means a lot to all of us.
Yeah.
We are done. If you want to add anything, you can please do so. Otherwise, we are very grateful for your time.
No, it was an excellent interaction, and thank you for calling me, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. We wish you the best, and let Renuka continue to support many millions more farmers and create a better future.
Yeah, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.